Hi, I'm Khairul Mbaha, and this is my review of the Sony FS-700. Now last week, I got a chance to play around with the Sony FS-700. Sony called me up and the test unit had just come in and they asked whether or not I'd like to play with it for 48 hours. Now before I get into some of the test footage, let's just go through some of the new cool things that have come out with the FS-700 in comparison to the older model, the Sony FS-100. Now, the main differences that I noticed the first time I got it was a lot bigger. And the main reason why it's a lot bigger is because finally, there is a camera with interchangeable lenses which has ND filters. Now you have no idea what kind of a godsend this is. Usually when you're shooting with, like at apertures like 1.8 out in the sun, you need some ND on there, either that you're pumping up the shutter speed, because we're in Malaysia, it's a really hot country, there's a lot of bright sunlight. The other thing that I noticed that was a lot different is the build quality. The FS-100, I had that camera for about a month and I was lugging it around everywhere. And it held its own, but you always felt like it was a bit plasticky. The FS-700 feels a little bit more solid, a little bit more sturdy. I'm not sure what the material is because I never got a manual. I just got the box, I got the camera, like take it, have fun with it. But it feels a lot sturdier. Another thing that feels sturdier is on the FS-100 you had like a little thing that you'd attach to the mic, which they'd say was also the handle, like if you wanted to do it like an over handle. But it always felt a bit scary because it was like kind of plastic parts and it wasn't really shaped, so you had to have like the thing came out there and you were kind of like holding it like that or like that. Now the FS-700, it's more of a big grip with the mic attachment up front, so it feels like a proper handle. But the main thing that a lot of people are talking about when it comes to this camera, and a lot of the test footage that is coming out from this camera, is the fact that it can shoot slow motion. So on the first day that I got it, I went around, I attached it to the Manfrotto car rig that I had, and I just drove around KL and I went around Pavilion taking some shots, and in bright daylight it looked gorgeous. The slow motion looked really cool. After that I went over to a Ramadan bazaar and then I just switched to the 50mm 1.4 Canon EF lens and my 35 f2. Now that's when the ND filters really came in handy, because I was shooting them open. I don't have a lens adapter which allows me to change aperture, so I was just shooting open as possible. And with the ND filters I was getting really nice exposures. Now all those tests that I did were in broad daylight. The problem arose when I wanted to try and shoot things with lighting. Now the very first test that I did before I went out and drove around KL was I set up one of my fluorescent lights and I shot like a little sequence, me and Michael, just doing a little like a basic 1, 2, 3 jab punch kind of thing, just to see how action would look like and whether or not I can slow down and speed up the motion. Like, like Zack Snyder films like 300, Watchmen, stuff like that. Now, doing that wasn't a problem. What was a problem though was fluorescent lighting. Now, fluorescent lighting flickers, and in slow motion, it picks it up. So then I started to get worried, like, okay, how am I gonna shoot something if I don't have broad daylight, if I don't have sunlight? And that becomes a real issue here. When you're going in slow motion, the whole concept of like light flickering, you really have to take that into consideration, especially with fluorescent light, because fluorescent light flickers. So I had an idea to shoot a short film, kind of like a superhero short film, like a real world superhero short film. It's just an idea that I was playing around with. And what I wanted to do was shoot it in what would look like a night sequence. Now it's still lighted, but I'd be shooting it still in quite a dark scenario because I'm still trying to replicate light. The thing was I needed to light up the place without using any of my fluorescents, which I always use. I'm using a bunch of them right now. What I did have was one redhead, one construction light with a tungsten bulb, the same as a redhead, and the lamps that you see around my house. So what I did was I set up the redhead over the skylight, so that would be like moonlight coming in, and I had the construction light out by the window behind me just to give the impression there was light outside. Then I would have a desk lamp just to fill out wherever I needed to fill out. So with that, everything looked alright when I was going at normal speeds, when I was shooting stuff at normal speeds. When I started going into slow motion though, a lot of noise suddenly popped up, which started to worry me. And you can't really notice it on the viewfinder, on the monitor that you have. On the monitor, everything looked clean. It looked gorgeous. The second I put it onto my computer, then I was like, whoa, oh my god. The noise levels just went up like a whole bunch of notches. And a loss in clarity as well, which was a bit annoying. And I found none of these problems when I was shooting in daylight, in broad daylight. None of these problems occurred. Now that I was shooting indoors with lighting, that's when I started noticing the noise in the slow motion. And then the other annoying thing was, because I couldn't shoot with fluorescents, I had to shoot with tungstens. I hadn't bought good tungsten bulbs yet, because I hardly ever use tungsten lights. You know, a lot of the times I'm moving around, I need to carry very light lights, and I don't like things to overheat. I don't want to use too much power, so I usually use fluorescents, match for daylight. So this was the first time I was actually using the redhead that I had, and the first time I put the bulb in, and after about 3 hours, the main bulb blew. So then I was like, ah, crap, I gotta relight this again. So I took the construction light from outside, I put that above to replace the redhead, shot for another hour and a bit, and then the construction light blew as well. So after blowing like 2 tungsten bulbs, I had to pump up the ISO even more, because I had even less light to play with. But the thing was, thankfully, you know, nowadays with post-production, what I did was I put it through Magic Bullet Looks and a bunch of the filters on Vegas as well, and just tried to bring everything to a level where the noise wasn't so distracting. So what I did was I put the nighttime filter from Magic Bullet Looks, and then I just started adjusting that a bit and adjusting the main video file as well, just to minimize the noise. And then I added film grain overall onto the whole video, so that the clean videos would have a touch of natural looking noise as well, so that everything would kind of blend in. What I was worried about was that things would be clean and then be noisy again, and it did come out looking pretty cool. So what's my final verdict on the camera? It is a very cool camera. In the 48 hours that I got to play with the camera, I really enjoyed it. I didn't have enough time to find out if there were more faults besides the noise in the low light when I was shooting in slow motion. But in shooting at normal speeds, low light looked just as good as before. All that aside though, all the positives that I found from the camera were really cool positives, and I really hope that Sony will let me play with it a little bit more, a little bit longer this time, because I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot. I wish I could afford to buy it. I can't. I'm shooting this on an NEX7. What can I say? Low budget filmmaker.